College and to moderate, rather I should say host. I don't plan to do a lot of heavy-handed moderating here, but to host this event tonight, which is part of Wilson Community College's observance of and celebration of Black History Month. All right, great. Well, let me introduce the panelists, which are the title of our presentation tonight, of our discussion, is really the most general one I could think of, because I thought it should be, the conversation should go where the conversation should go. And part of the reason for that is because I say this with all sincerity, we have a great panel who have a wonderful depth and breadth of background, so that I really look forward to this discussion, and I myself want to do as little shaping of that discussion as I can. And likewise the title, and that's why the title is a broad one: African American History and Higher Education, Challenges and Opportunities. The first panelist I'd like to introduce, and we're doing this in alphabetical order if you're wondering, is Dr. Crystal Chambers. Good evening, Dr. Chambers.
Good evening. I aim high for that CC at the top of the alphabet.
There you go. Dr. Chambers is a professor in the ECU College of Education. Dr. Chambers earned a BA at Spelman College, which, just so everybody knows, and I want to say a little bit about the colleges that our panelists went to, because I think the range of educational experience that they had is extraordinary, and it is very relevant to the topic tonight of African American history and higher education. So Spelman College, and just in case you don't know, is probably, well, it absolutely is the preeminent historically Black college or university for women in the United States. And by not a few estimations, it is, whether men's, women's, or co-ed, the premier HBCU in the United States. Then she went on to earn a PhD and a JD at the University of Virginia. And also, Dr. Chambers was my professor. So yes, you're correct. She was a child prodigy. That's how that happened. Our next panelist is Dr. John Doby, who is an associate professor of chemistry at Barton College here in Wilson. And we are also happy to say he's an adjunct instructor for us here at Wilson Community College. Dr. Doby earned a bachelor's and a master's at the University of Cape Coast, which is a large comprehensive research university in the Republic of Ghana. Then he went on to earn a PhD at the University of Nevada, Reno. So another, I think, interesting set of educational experiences. And I thought also it would be very interesting to have Dr. Doby here to contribute from the point of view of the hard sciences. Our next panelist is my friend and colleague at our sister institution in the next county over, Dr. Greg McLeod, who is the president of Edgecombe Community College. Dr. McCloud earned a BS at UNC Chapel Hill. So I'm glad this is virtual, and Dr. Chambers, the Cavalier, and Dr. McCloud, the Tar Heel, are in separate locations. A master's degree at North Carolina State University. Everybody on this call knows both of those institutions very well. And yet another educational experience, Dr. McLeod earned his PhD at Barry University, which is a large private Catholic university in Miami. And it is also a very interesting place. I didn't know much about Barry University, and in my research for this event tonight, I was interested to find out that Barry University is maybe the most diverse and the most equally diverse university that anyone on this panel went to. It is roughly, its students are roughly a third African American, a third Latinx Americans, and somewhere around 20% or 25% European Americans, and then some few percentage of folks who identify otherwise. So I thought that was that may be nearly unique, I think, in those percentages. Our next participant is Dr. David Moody, Dr. Moody? There you are. Might want to wave when we call your name in case there's somebody out there who doesn't know who you are. Dr. Moody is a criminal justice instructor here at Wilson Community College. And Dr. Moody, I'll start with what's not on the sheet that I sent some of you guys earlier is Dr. Moody, before he began his education career, was a law enforcement officer. In fact, he was a state patrolman for a number of years in North Carolina before he got into education. Dr. Moody has a bachelor's degree at Fayetteville State University. And Fayetteville State University, I think, is particularly interesting because of the several HBCUs in North Carolina. I believe I'm correct in saying Fayetteville State has the most diverse student population. I think more than a third of its students, in fact, are not African American, but are some other ethnicity, which makes it sort of an interesting urban university now, Fayetteville, such a large place. Dr. Moody has a master's degree from East Carolina University, which we all know very well. And yet another unique experience, Dr. Moody has a PhD from Capella University, which is a large online for-profit university, which is another unique educational experience. And last, but certainly not least, Dr. Sheril Roberts, who is our Dean of College Transfer and Public Services here at Wilson Community Colleges. Dr. Roberts has a BSW from East Carolina and 2 masters. She has a master's from Liberty University, which is another large, now both on campus and online, religious-based university. And she has an MSCE, which I believe is a continuing education, a specialty in continuing education, Dr. Roberts, from the University of West Alabama. And if you're not familiar with the University of West Alabama, it is something like East Carolina or Appalachian State is part of the Alabama system, and it's a large regional university. And then she earned her EDD at Northeastern University, which is yet again a different sort of university for this group. It is a private, not religious affiliated university out of Boston, and it is a comprehensive research university, and it has a number of physical campus locations around the country, one of which in North Carolina is in Charlotte, I believe. So those, if I have omitted anything important or have been inaccurate in any of that I just stated, please correct me or add that now. But you can see why I think the educational experiences of this particular panel are so important, because they do encompass such a broad range of educational experiences that you can speak to specifically the African American student experience across the range of American higher education. So thank you all. We're very glad to have you. Thank you for joining us tonight. And I will start with several of the questions that our audience members submitted for us today. And let me start with, we could start with almost any question, but let me start with one that was submitted late, which I did not give you guys yet because it came in sort of late. But I think it's a great question to sort of set the stage for this whole conversation. And the question, and I'm paraphrasing, the question was, as an African-American student and later as an African-American educator, what do you find that you think about on a daily basis, say, even in matters, and the question was even in matters of dress, for example, that when you go to work, you feel that you have to give a second thought to, that white students or educators might not have to think about? And I would say anyone who wants to answer that, please go ahead.
Well, I'll start just because in my baccalaureate experience at Spelman College, I didn't have to think about it. We were a bunch of women, and so we could roll out with rollers in our hair to that 8 o'clock in the morning class, so long as there wasn't a Morehouse man in the class. Then, it was kind of just, socially prohibited from doing so. But seriously, when you look at Janetta B. Cole's work on Conversations with Assistant President, it's a 1996-ish. She talks about Spelman being this relatively racism-free, relatively sexism-free environment. No, racism isn't completely gone there, or sexism either, because if we think about internalized oppressions that we all have and we fight ourselves on, and that was still there, and certainly heterosexism was rampant, and that was apparent in, I believe, Alice Walker's Temple of My Familiar kind of hints on some of that. Not to mention, there's some things that Audre Lorde talks about. So just because we're in the U.S., you're going to encounter things. But it was nice in this semi-utopian environment to just be able to be. To be perfectly honest, as Janetta B. Cole still knows me, but she remembers me as the kid with the baseball cap, because that's how I went to class. At University of Virginia, I really don't remember it being such an issue. I do recall it being an issue as a professional. So when I taught at NC State, I had these long dreadlocks that went down my back. That was nearly 20 years ago. And I still have a slight bit of my baby face still now. So you can imagine what I looked then with long dreads. And I had a few interactions where, had to check students, I really am the professor here. And so then ended up when I transferred from NC State to ECU, cutting my locks and taking a much more quote unquote professional look. And by professional, I mean more middle class. I flat ironed my hair. I wasn't going to use another relaxer, but those were the types of considerations I was making. And Dr. Wright can attest to this. I wore suits to work. I wear jeans occasionally now, but back then I wore suits to work. And just, I've been able to, as I've gotten used to the institution has gotten used to me, I think be more of myself. But there is that challenge of being true to who you are, as well as understanding how that's going to be interpreted. And I appreciate the natural hair laws that are springing up here and there.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak to that question, Dr. Dobie?
So what I would like to see as far as the question, having gone to school in Ghana, where I don't have to really worry about some of the issues that are unique to the American experience from the African American point of view, I didn't have to worry about most of those for my undergraduate and when I started my master's at the University of Cape Coast. I didn't have to worry about these things. But I recall maybe a number of instances. For example, when I was as a graduate student at the University of Nevada, Reno, I recall in a mathematical physics course that I took. This was a course that I was required to take again. I'd taken that course before while in Ghana doing my master's, and one of my colleagues, who actually is also from Ghana, we thought we did very well. We went to see the professor when we were averaging like A's in the class to the end, and the grades came out, and we got a B. So like none of our peers in the course could beat us at what we were doing. I mean, so we went to see her, and she was like, people like you, this is what you get. Well, we didn't quite understand some of these. So we look at each other, we said, well, time to get out of this office. I mean, there's nothing we can do to convince our professor at a point that hey, we thought we did much better. So we left it at that. So for me, years down the line, we got to learn that there are some things in the system here that we have to actually worry about. It's not like Ghana when we took things for granted that, hey, your professors are going to see you as who you are, not as people like you. Then I finished graduate school, went to teaching school in Colorado. Again, my colleagues, quote unquote, couldn't believe that I can have a PhD. Something that I had to struggle with for a very long time. So then I have to change my attitude on, hey, maybe I need to behave in a certain way. I need to present myself to my colleagues and my students in a certain way. So for me, and then there were some other things along the line, but one of the other things that I've also realized, I've also noticed is that when I walk into class, like before class will start, students always wondered who is going to be the teacher here. They couldn't understand that I could be the teacher. And I have to make that very clear. Something that I don't think, say, my colleagues who are lighter skinned than I am will have to worry about. So there are some things that even to today, I have to really keep that in mind. That perhaps we all have PhDs, but our PhDs are perhaps is clouded by the color of my skin or the color of somebody else's skin. So that is what I have to say to that for now.
Thank you, Dr. Dobie. I don't want to make you talk more than you want to about the subject, but is it your impression, and maybe the other panelists could jump in on this, is it your impression that though that's a problem across the board for African American students and educators, that it's a bigger problem or more common problem in the hard sciences?
I believe so. See, again, maybe the problem that I have also is that because I did not go to school here from the beginning, there were some things that I learned along the way. But another thing, it could be maybe just the field of science itself. I find myself alone, if I may put it that way, that I have been to a number of conferences, professional conferences, and hardly will I find somebody that I can relate to. And again, in those conferences, I have to make it a point to even say, I am the professor and here are my students. And I have had students that at the time, now they've moved on to do other stuff. But the students will have to let those people know that, hey, you better talk to this guy. He is the professor. We are just his student. So things like that, where even in those places, again, just because we don't have a whole lot of African Americans in the STEM field to start off with, so you will find yourself as just the odd one, if I may say, put it that way, in some of those crowds. So yes, maybe the unique thing is also for STEM, where you find a lot of you don't find a whole lot of African Americans in that.
I see where Dr. Chambers said his experiences are reflected in national data. Thank you, Dr. Dobie. Any other panelists like to speak to that issue? Dr. McCloud?
Okay, sure. Thank you, sir. Well, first of all, it's an honor to be on here. Thank you for inviting me to join this esteemed panel. So first of all, I carry the weight of being the president of Edgecombe Community College, but on top of that, I carry the weight of being the first African-American president in this college's history. And so I recognize that, and I try to honor that with, how I carry myself, not just by how I execute in the position and do what I can to help lead the college. But I recognize that all eyes are on me. You know, that's a real thing, and I can't get around that. I'm very comfortable in myself. I'm very comfortable in my manhood. I'm very comfortable in my Blackness. I'm very comfortable in my uniqueness, but you know, all eyes are on me because in the entire 50 plus years prior, there's never been anybody who looked like me in the position here. And on top of it, I'm here, our county seat is Tarboro, and it's a very small community. And this might be alarming for some, and maybe I exaggerate to some degree, but I really don't think I am. And I've questioned people in the community about this, but I'm just about the only Black guy who wears a suit in Tarboro during the week when it's not Sunday. And so I recognize that. It's interesting. I'm not, you know, afraid to be that person. In fact, I'm proud of that because I feel like people need to see that, particularly our young people, not just our Black students, but all of our students. And if it helps to encourage and uplift somebody by seeing a positive Black male role model wearing a suit on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, then I try to do that. I also deal with the fact that for many people that I interact with here in Edgecombe County, I'm still a young pup. You know, I'll be 50 years old this year. But, you know, all of my trustees and most people I deal with in the community, they're older than I am. And so, you know, I don't go around saying, hey, I'm the president at Edgecombe Community College. Normally when I introduce myself, I say, yes, I'm Greg McCloud and I work at Edgecombe Community College. And, you know, a lot of people know me now. I've been here 2.5+ years, but those who don't, it's interesting because their first impression is not that I'm an administrator, that I may be the president. They're often initially would say, okay, you know, what do you teach? And that's great. I'm proud of that. You know, I'm a former teacher. I taught math and some other subjects, but, you know, that is the first impression. And when I say, well, I'm the president, oh, you know, their reaction is almost startling. And, you know, I wish that wasn't the case that people had that, but I know that's ingrained in society. You know, they're shocked by that. But I take it that one, I do feel the pressure that I need to dress up. And there's people who throughout my entire higher ed administration career, former coworkers, they will tell me, they'll say, Dr. McCloud, I've never seen you not in a suit. Well, I don't take pride in that, but that just might be the case because I feel like I do have to present and I want to show this look for some people who may never see this look, you know, outside of church service. So, so I think the pressure is there, but, you know, I do it proudly and it's okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. McCloud. Yeah, Dr. Roberts.
I have to echo Dr. McCloud. The pressure is definitely there. Although I attended a predominantly white institution for undergrad, I didn't feel the pressure there as much. But once I started working in the professional setting, I was very aware that, you know, you have to be careful, you know, in how you present yourself, you know. In the African American community, especially for women, you know, we like to wear braids and different styles that are popular in our culture. But for me, you know, it can be a little scary because it can be a little off-putting to people. You know, you wonder, is it professional enough? I have to be careful that, you know, I don't have the wrong hair color. I have to watch, you know, the way I dress. I can't have something that, you know, is form-fitting, you know, to show curves or anything. Like I have to be careful in what I wear and what I, and how I speak, and especially the hair. And as Dr. Chambers mentioned, just wearing your hair straight, and you can't. We feel like we can't be as Black as we truly are in the professional setting, because that may be a little off-putting to other people who aren't Black.
Thank you. Dr. Moody, I guess you're our last one to weigh in on this subject.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. Like Dr. McCloud, now I believe in wearing a tie, but 99% of the time I wear a tie and I try to present myself in a professional way. And I think that when I look back at my career in education, there's certain things that made me get to where I am now. Growing up very poor and being the first one to go to college in my family, that was very important. Now, back when I was at Fayetteville State, living on campus, it was 98% minority. So I felt very comfortable. Matter of fact, I felt so comfortable, it took me 5 years to graduate instead of 4. So that was one of those experiences I'll tell you about at another time. But I think that in all my career, I was first a police officer in Fayetteville, and that was pretty comfortable. And then I think my shocker, what brought me back to world, is when I was a state trooper. I'm the first African-American state trooper to be in a little town called Snow Hill. And believe me, I really got a welcome in that town. They loved me so much. They slashed my tires on my cars and did some other things. And then from there, I think when you talk about education, you got to be happy. And when you're in a certain career, you have to be happy. But I found myself in the early 90s. I said, if I ever had a job, back in the 90s, $30,000 was a lot of money. And I found myself in saying, hey, if I ever get to that point in my life, I'm going to stick with that job. But I woke up one day and found myself not happy. And then I decided to go teach high school, and I taught middle school. And then I ended up here at Wilson Community College. I think it's important for young people to see us in a certain light. And I let people know in a heartbeat, young people, from an educational point of view, there's no such a thing that I can't go to college. You can make it if you want to make it. So it's all in the way you present yourself. I have to be so careful with what I say to some people. I have to be careful with my words to make sure I don't offend anybody, because we both know you might say one thing one way, but when it comes out in the paper, it's totally a different situation. So as an educator, I'm in touch with myself also as a Black male. I enjoy being a Black male, and I enjoy the good things and the challenges that come along with that position.
Thank you. Thank you all for your answers to that question. That's why I asked that question. I thought it was a great question asked by one of our instructors to get the conversation started in a very frank way about significant factors to set the tone for the rest of it. I will say, Dr. Moody, my issue with being quoted in the newspaper, unfortunately, is that I get quoted all too accurately. That's my problem. Let's go to another question, and a different kind of question, if you would. Maybe one where you have some advices for some folks. And the question is, what experience, opportunity, or program do you think was the most important contributor to your success in earning a doctoral degree? There's another part to that question, but let's begin with that. Anybody want to take that one?
Okay.
Dr. McLeod, thank you.
Thank you. And, you're fairly accurate with your description of Barry University. I didn't know really anything about Barry prior to starting the process of applying for entry into the program. However, what worked out for us, I was living in Florida at the time, working at a rather large community college, and one of the vice presidents there worked out a deal where we would go through the Higher Education Administration degree program via a cohort model. And so I would say that that model really helped me as a student in more ways than one to get through the program. Namely because in the cohort were a lot of my colleagues at my community college, and quite a few of them who looked like me. So we were able to commiserate, we were able to bond, we were able to collaborate, we worked together on projects, we encouraged each other, and there was no such thing as not finishing the program. So it was like positive peer pressure. We're all going to get through this together. So that cohort model, having mentors in the program, we had the professors that we had were very, very flexible with us, and they worked with us because most of us were working professionals, and it just worked out. So I would say that the connections in the program just helped me see it through.
So you thought the cohort model was a really good model for you, and I'm inferring from your answer. Correct me if I infer wrongly, that you think it's a pretty good idea for a student to do their homework and investigate the programs they're going into at different universities to see how those programs work and if they think they'll be comfortable and productive there.
Right. And it doesn't have to be a cohort model, but I think the benefit of the cohort model was having people that went through the program with me, and we were supporters of each other. We celebrated, life's accomplishments along the way when we successfully passed our comprehensive exams, when we successfully defended our proposal, when, as we got through it, and we helped each other with research and things like that. It was a wonderful model that helped me as a parent, as a husband, as a working individual, to have that support from my colleagues. And so I guess you don't have to have it in a cohort model, but that cohort model certainly allows for that. And, so that's what helped me.
Thank you. Anybody else have an experience to answer that question, Dr. Chambers?
So my experience is very different from Dr. McCloud's in that I was a full-time doctoral student on campus. That was my full-time job, was to be a doctoral student. And in fact, in sitting in my dissertation defense, my dad thought that they were going to flunk me because he thought I was too arrogant. But I will say, within the context of getting my law degree, I really needed a set of community support, as well as with our dean of students there. She was my special significant mentor person who created an intervention that really saved my my career there academically. And I had a Spelman professor tell me that I would do okay in law school, but that I would hate it. And she was absolutely correct. And about halfway in, I'm having this, conflictual crisis. I graduated from Spelman with a 3.8, and I had gotten my first C in law school. It's a challenging experience when you're first faced with that. Of course, I finally earned my dad's respect because I finally struggled for a grade. But with that, she talked me off the cliff, and also helped me find a strategy for moving forward. What is it that I'm missing? She paired me up with a peer who was doing well. But in addition to that, we had a community of support. There was a Black Graduate and Professional Student Association. And so I was able to interact with the law students, but also med students and students in the arts and biomedical sciences and a whole host of other students, all of us Black people in these common struggles of just trying to get through grad school. So community matters, and having those mentors also matter too.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'll say, Dr. Chambers, I really appreciate your admitting that you were an arrogant student because, as you know, I was a rather cocky doctoral student myself. So I'm glad there's more than one of us.
That's why we got along so well.
Okay, well, good. Yeah, I never thought of that. Anybody else want to speak to what you think pointed you toward and helped you through your doctoral degree?
I'll go. I'll say for me, I was also part of a cohort, and we would go to or meet in Charlotte on the weekends and have class there. And we really got a chance to work together, to bounce out ideas off each other. So that really helped. The fact that they allowed us to work on our dissertation from the moment we stepped on campus for that first class until we got into the dissertation phase. That was really, really helpful. But I will say the biggest motivating factor for me was just family support. That really got me through it, that and a lot of prayer, of course. But, the fact that I was doing something that honored my grandfather, I think was a big motivating factor for me. Dr. McCloud, I'm from Tarboro originally, so I know not everybody wears a suit and tie every day, but, and my grandfather lived in Tarboro, and to make him happy, he had an 8th grade education. So to make him happy and give him one more thing to brag about was a big motivating factor for me. That and having my daughter see that, you can be a Black female and have doctor in front of your name. And my 12-year-old is extremely proud of that. So that was a big motivating factor for me.
Thank you. Any other, by the way, full disclosure, I grew up in Roanoke Rapids, which is right up the road. And Dr. Roberts came to us from Halifax Community College, and in high school, Tarboro was one of our big rivals in football, and so I'm pretty familiar with northeastern North Carolina myself, both the good, the bad, and unfortunately the ugly. Anybody else like to speak on that topic? Was that you, Dr. Moody? Please.
My experience with my PhD, I had when I got to my dissertation phase, I had a very strong mentor at Capella. And one of the requirements is we had to meet online every week. And there was 12 people in our group at different phases of the PhD. And every week you had to give a report on where you were with writing your paper and what goals you were going to set for the next week. So it got to the point where we decided that, hey, we needed some face-to-face time. And we all decided a couple of times that the halfway point was Atlanta, Georgia. So I would get up on a Friday morning and go down to Atlanta, Georgia to meet the other 11 classmates. And we all would rent the conference room at a hotel. And we spent that weekend working on our dissertation. That's what's got me through that. But also, I had a very strong mentor from ECU by the name of Dr. Mary Jackson. And I could lean on her when I had to. And I got to tell you this quick, funny story because she's a type of person that's not lost for words. I remember I thought I could write. And I remember I wrote something for her and I gave it to her. And she looked at this. She says, "What is this?" And I said, I wrote the paper for you, Dr. Jackson. And it had so much red ink on it, looked like it was Christmas. And she says, "I will not accept this again, so redo it." So she was so hard on me. So all the different people, and I think the biggest thing that keeps me going, I dedicate everything I am to. I had a praying mother that really believed that it was important for you to make something out of yourself. And I thank God, and I wish she was here to see what her son has achieved today.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Moody. Well, it seems that mentorship, a good mentor and a cohort or something that functions like a cohort are two really important things. Well, let's move ahead to another question then. Another question that came in a little bit late, and again, I will ask this question in a little shorter form. It was a great question with a lot of context in it. But the basic question was, in the last couple of decades, have African Americans made any measurable gains in like graduation rates, for example? And if so, do we know what we can attribute those gains to? Are there things out there that we know that work? I briefly looked at some NCES data. I thought I had a good idea of the answer. It looked to me, the latest data from NCES, you know, if you're familiar with NCES, it reports for graduation rates 4-year, 5-year, and 6-year. And so the latest cohort was the 2012 starting cohort, because 6-year takes it to 2018, and then it takes a couple of years to compile the data and everything. So that's the most recent that was available that I saw. And there have been gains depending on which of those cohorts you look at. They're either about the same or there are gains, but it didn't. They were relative gains. In other words, they were gains where all of the ethnic groups that were listed made gains, and the gains were relatively the same. But there wasn't a closing of, which was part of another question we got, which was the achievement gap question. But in the stats I was looking at, there were gains, but not a closing of the gap. So I wonder if anyone would like to speak to that question. I thought, Dr. Chambers, I was hoping you would, because I know this is right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, my students joke about me being a walking encyclopedia, which I heard is better than being Google, a walking Google. That's kind of creepy. So my work is actually more on the college enrollment side. And so it's a different side of the fence. And I do have colleagues who argue, well, with 60% of all students in the US attending some form of post-secondary education, so people between 18 and 24 going to a 2-year, a 4-year, a private or a public, profit, non-for-profit, or public institution, then maybe there isn't an enrollment gap so much, or there isn't an issue so much that we really do need to focus on the graduation side. I still believe that there is this difference in those initial enrollment rates between Black and brown communities, white and Asian communities. But we have made progress. And so when I started doing this work in early 2000s, there was a researcher then by the name of Theodore Cross, who said that the rate of college attendance among Black males was so low that if it continued at the trajectory at that time, that by 2025, so 4 years from now, the percentage of Black males in higher education would be 0. That has reversed course. And so actually, when I last looked at this maybe 5 or 6 years ago, the gains that Black men have made in terms of the number of enrollments have significantly increased, and they're getting closer to Black women's enrollments, but there still is about this 2-to-1 factor, but it's still going up. And so, yes, we are making gains, but I think there's also this need to keep at it, keep struggling. You know, college, you can be a college student. I don't think Kanye West helped us with that college dropout thing. But my son did show me this one video, and I'm sorry, I cannot remember the rapper. Goodness, if he only responded to text quickly, I would have him send it to me so I could put it in the chat for you. But this one rapper who was talking about the beauty of education for him as a Black man, and he brings in some quotes from Malcolm X and some other things in it, and I love this newer age expression of Black knowledge, but especially from that Black male perspective. Black women have known for years that, you know, we're going to be stuck at home with babies in the households that we have to care for and the like, and I think we've been more diligent because we have been more attuned to those responsibilities. This is not to discount the frustrations that Black men encounter in daily life. It's also not to discount the feminization of K-12 education, which makes some Black males feel as though education is something for other people, you know, with, you know, still like 80% of the teaching workforce being white and female. I feel like I'm rambling at this point, and so I'm going to stop there. So Dr. Roberts has her hand up.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Roberts.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't have any national stats or anything, but as you mentioned, I worked at Halifax Community College for a while. I was there almost 9 years. And I can say in my time there, there was a male mentoring program called the Pride Male Mentoring Program. And before this program, I believe our graduation rates, our retention rates for Black males, the rates were significantly low. But the amount of time and the amount of passion and knowledge that the mentors in the Pride Male Mentoring Program poured into these males, I think at one point they had over 150 males in the program. And it wasn't just, let's, follow up on your grades. It wasn't anything like that. They really poured into these males, and they held these male students accountable for their work, for things outside of school. They had events such as like tie day. They would come in and teach these guys how to tie a tie. They had a closet for them to get suits and ties to wear to different interviews. But I think, what really helped these guys, the male students, was seeing someone who looked like them, in these positions to say, hey, I was once in your shoes and I made it out, and I'm here, I'm a professional, I'm successful, and I'm here to help you. And I think having that program, we had gotten to the point where the Black males had started, their rates were passing or, they were doing much better than the females. And then we had to start looking at the female success rates. But I think because these guys, they really poured into them and they took them under their wings and really showed these guys that, we care about you, we care about your success. And if you're not doing well in your classes, I'm going to, talk to your instructor and find out what's going on. If you're doing something outside of school that we don't agree with and that we don't feel is going to benefit you in any way, I'm going to talk to you about it. So they were like the big brothers or male figure, in the lives of a lot of male students. And like I said, it helped to increase their retention rates and graduation rates. So, and then eventually some of those students came back and they were employed by Halifax Community College. So again, I think being able to see themselves in professionals in the higher education field, I think helps to maybe increase those retention rates and make them feel as though they belong in higher education.
Thank you. I don't remember the person who wrote this, but it was something I read in Sports Illustrated many years ago. I remember this, and it was a sports writer, and it was a European American sports writer, not African American, but he was talking about some experience one of his children had with some great athlete who was also a great human being that one of his children had gotten to know. And anyway, the quote that I remembered is something like, one of the greatest gifts you can hope for your children is that they know they have relationships with other adults whom they would hate to disappoint. And I thought that was a powerful thought. Dr. McCloud?
Sure, thank you. And I think your quote that you just said, it certainly resonates with me from the perspective of your first question where you asked about today's achievement rates compared to say 40, 50 years ago. 50 years ago, we were trying to come together as a country in regards to integration. And even before that, and in the early years of that, from what I have gathered from my forefathers and foremothers and others who I've had the privilege and honor of sitting at their feet and learning, is they had, for reasons that were not all positive, but they had such a sense of urgency. Okay, they also had a sense of cultural and ethnic pride that perhaps is maybe there's some of that there now, but back then you didn't have a lot of these other distractions with the internet and technology and all of that. We just had each other. And to your point of what you were saying is, making somebody proud, or, you had people looking at you. And to what Dr. Roberts were saying, I think you said about your grandfather, right? The folks 50 years ago, they still had that direct connection to their grandparents and great-grandparents who all they knew were the fields. And so when they had the opportunity to get an education or to do something for themselves, they knew they could not squander that. They knew that the weight, either unfairly or fairly, the weight of all that was on their shoulders. And I think to a great degree, they took it with pride and they said, I'm going to do something for myself. I'm going to make something of myself. And perhaps today the numbers might be more because there's more people in this country when it comes to going to college. And I think that's certainly a more common thing to accept, and people more naturally nowadays say, well, I'm gonna go to college, as they did maybe 50 years ago. I do wonder about the statistics. I do wonder about the success rates, because I would say Edgecombe Community College is not too undifferent than a lot of other colleges, in the sense that the women are kicking our guys behind. And the males in the community colleges, and I would also say the four-year schools, they lag behind. And the statistics show that, especially for Black males. When you see, it was an article in yesterday's usatoday.com talking about the great percentage of homicides related to gun violence that is suffered by Black men. Although Black men make up such a small percentage of the population here in the country, but they make up over 1/3 of the homicide deaths due to gun violence. And then I have family members who work in the prison system here in North Carolina, and to hear them talk about the overwhelming majority of what the Black inmates, the inmates in these prisons look like, they all look like Black males, because most of them are. And, so when you account for those two populations, the few who happen to make it to college is a blessing. And so we got to do all we can to help them see it through. So for me, coming here to Edgecombe, I realized that, and we've had for a long time, male mentoring program to help support primarily our minority males, but any of our males who want to join. We cannot just wait for those students to happen to show up at our doors to start engaging them. We've got to reach them earlier, because the ones who happen to show up, they did that on their own, and like, okay, we can take credit for then helping them get to the finish line from getting to our door, but we need to reach down to those who never even get to our front door. And for some of them, they end up in those prisons. Some of them end up dead in the streets because of gun violence and gangs and things like that. So we're trying to re-engineer how we approach our minority male mentoring program by connecting more with the K-12 system, by connecting more in the neighborhoods and the community centers and the churches and the nonprofit, mentoring groups, because we got to reach them earlier. And so not sure how today's stats compare to 50 years ago or 40 years ago, but I know going forward, we're going to try our best to improve upon where we are today by reaching back to those students who don't even think about coming to college.
Thank you. Let me take a shot at answering part of the question about what works. And this works for all students, but I think it's particularly critical for African-American students to the extent that they tend to be economically disadvantaged, at least at a greater rate. And that is that, as Dr. McCloud just alluded to, and he knows this very well, and some of you other guys on the call know this too, maybe everybody, but particularly in community colleges, we are not resourced to do a lot beyond simply teaching those students. But the fact of the matter is that their impediments to their success are largely outside of the college. They're outside of the classroom. And we're not resourced to address those sorts of issues, but we're all scrambling to find ways to do that with, things like transportation and childcare and food insecurity, those sorts of issues. That it's not that I remember having this conversation with an interviewer a few years ago. I said, it's not that our students, can't write an essay or can't do the quadratic equation. It's that they can't keep a ride to school every day through a semester, right? It's that if their child gets in a situation where they have to be with them, they can't hire a babysitter so that they can go to class. Those are the big impediment issues. So as far as things that work, boy, I'd love to have the resources to see how much better those things could work if we, were able to fulfill those needs. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to insert myself as a panel member there, but I know that's a particular issue. Maybe it's getting here about 7 o'clock. If you would, let me ask one other question, which was a prepared question. And then when we get through that, we'll go around and see if our audience has any live questions they'd like to ask, if that's agreeable to everybody. And this is a little different question. I'm not sure if everyone on our panel has the experience to answer it, but it's an interesting question. What are the current challenges and opportunities for HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities today? What do you see as their missions and the evolution of HBCUs going forward? Dr. Moody?
I just want to comment just a little bit, and I know for sure if my HBCU didn't give me the opportunity as an undergrad to be a part of that school, that I wouldn't be here today. It's, to me, it's no different than the community college, doctor, right? You being a great leader at an HBCU, you have to have great leadership. You have to have someone with that vision and say, I have students at different levels. What can I do to help my students? And when you look at the reality, we have to say that, hey, when you graduate from that HBCU, some people feel that degree does not carry as much weight as other institutions. So I just wanted to say a few things, because I know Dr. Chambers is going to get in on this because she's in that same predicament that I am. But I'm saying that HBCU, sometimes you have to be more nurturing in certain situations, because as some of you said before, we have males and minorities that have barriers to overcome that other people just don't understand. You can't tell me that you know how I feel as a black male if you have never walked in my shoes before. You can't tell me that you know how it is to be poor if you've never been poor before. That's a good conversation me and my wife have all the time. I said, she grew up a pretty nice neighborhood and everything. But I said, honey, certain things you can't tell me because you don't know how to reach that person. So it's very important when you're dealing with HBCUs and you have other things in place so that when those students graduate, they'll be successful and they'll go back and help another. I'm going to yield the rest of my time to Dr. Chambers.
Dr. Chambers, did you want to comment on that?
Sure. I'll bite on that one. You're absolutely right, Dr. Moody. Historically black colleges and universities come out of a culture of care, and therefore by their construction have this ethic of care that they pervade in their teaching. In fact, there are studies showing that white students do very well, exceptionally well in historically black colleges. Why? Because professors are set up to care for, to teach, to bring their students along from point A to point B. And actually, part of the reason I think I get along so well in ECU is that there's a little bit of that mentality there, that there is this perceived need to reach students where they are and bring them up to where they need to be. And so our students do exhibit a lot of growth. In terms of where HBCUs are growing, y'all are either going to gasp, laugh, or both. But I will say that Donald Trump was probably the best thing that ever happened to HBCUs, because all of that rhetoric brought so many Black students back to historically Black colleges, because they were looking for affirming places. They were looking for places that were going to build them up. They're looking for places that were going to strengthen them. And it also became this place where HBCU alumni got to, show what they know. Stacey Abrams was one of my my fellow Spelman students. We graduated 1995 political science, took the bar in Georgia the same in 1998 together. And then, of course, we see what's happened with Kamala Harris and Howard University. And there have been several other HBCU graduates on this display. So thank you. That might not have been the intended impact, because, again, these are wonderful institutions that have a history of access, that do care for their students and bring them forward, regardless of what their backgrounds are. And I do appreciate that historic attention to African-American communities and keeping African-American history alive and well and imbuing character and the like. Well, I have a heart there, so. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak to that question? Dr. McCloud.
Well, I did not attend a HBCU, so I don't want anybody to bash me. But, I do have a perspective and, an opinion, if you will. So I think HBCUs in particular can lead the way with really continuing to inspire, encourage, and challenge students to pursue all fields of human endeavor. As we know here at Fayetteville State, for example, they have a wonderful cybersecurity program. We know Central has a wonderful law school. North Carolina A&T State University is known worldwide for their engineering program. And Elizabeth City State has a great aviation program, and the list goes on and on. And the reason why I'm saying this is because just recently it hit me. Earlier today, I was on LinkedIn, and I'm hitting like because I'm reading this remark by this young Black lady who said she was proud to have just learned that she passed her last CPA test, and that there's less than 2% of the CPAs in this country are Black CPAs, not just Black women, but Black CPAs. And then on top of it, we know that, even with the great production that A&T has, there's still a lack of Black engineers in this country. There's been articles over the last year or two regarding the lack of Black medical doctors and how that impacts healthcare, especially in rural communities where if you're, an older Black patient and you don't, maybe there's some issues that maybe you would be able to address with the Black medical doctor that you're not getting addressed because of the lack of awareness or empathy and concern that you get from somebody else. And the list goes on and on. I started a coding and robotics camp during my time in Virginia because I'd done some research and found that the percentages of computer programmers and engineers in Silicon Valley was horrific. And this was during the time, it was about 4 or 5 or 6 years ago when, I don't know if you remember, but Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and others were taking Silicon Valley to task with regard to the lack of diversity in their upper ranks and with their programmers. And so we have seen since then, schools like Howard University now has, it's like Howard West, where they send classes of students over to Apple and Cisco and IBM to learn for a semester next to those programmers so they can increase their skills. We need to keep doing things like that. We need to, you know, obviously educate and train as many students as we can, but I think we need to encourage and challenge them to go into every field of human endeavor so that we will no longer, and I hope we'll get to a place where there will no longer be a time where we'll need to say that, oh, that person was the first Black person in that position, because we will have already been there and done that. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking to some of what you just talked about, Dr. McCloud, and to Dr. Dobie's experience, I noticed, I think when it was last week when the Mars rover landed, and I don't know if any of you watched any of that on TV live, but when they showed mission control, it struck me, thinking about it being Black History Month, looking in that control room, and I looked around, and I, you know, this is anecdotal. I didn't see everybody who was in the control room, but looking, and I could probably see 20 people, and I did not see an African American in that control room, and it just struck me. Anyway, so unfortunately, I think that sadly speaks to what you were talking about, Dr. McCloud, and to Dr. Dobie's experience in the STEM disciplines. Dr. Dobie?
Okay, so I would like to give an opinion here, since I have no experience at all with HBCUs, you know, directly. But here is what I will say, based on just my years of having, you know, taught here, out of grad school, and teaching here, here and there. But one thing that I have noticed is that the African American male students, for some reason, that I don't know, it might be, again, not having grown up here, there are some cultural things that I probably will never understand. But one of the things that I have noticed for the few students, African American male students, that I have tried to kind of bring closer to me and see if I can mentor them. And I have, by the way, I have been very successful with the females. At least I can kind of, one of them has even gone as far as going to actually doing her PhD at this point, and I'm still in touch with her, you know, give her as much support as I could, even though she's no more my student. But for the male student, one of the things that I have seen is that there is this sort of inertia from them to at least from my little observation, is that they have this thing where their fixation is more on sports and making it to maybe become the top basketball player, NBA or football player. That seems to be more of the initial, or for them, what makes them want to be in college to start off with. And then when they get there, they seem to be, again, that focus away from academics. And so anything else, and they get into, again, part of it too that I have observed is that they want to sort of belong. And in trying to belong, they forget about the academics, what will actually be more enduring. So I'll give you a little conversation that I have with a group of students very recently, maybe actually this was last week in one of my courses at Baden. And the conversation was this. I was telling them how I was in London over the break doing some work. And one of them was like, oh, I would really like to go to Europe. And I said, for what reason? And part of it was about sports. I said, okay. So I said, well, you wouldn't, in European model of education, you cannot use sports to go to college. There are some special schools that you could use. And if you want to have that kind of training, so if you want to be soccer, whatever, which is what I'm more familiar with, and any other sport, there are special lessons, but you can go to college, play any of the sport, and go through college. It doesn't work quite like that. So for me, in Ghana, and I was giving them my experiences, this is what it's all about. I was more of a bookworm than anything else. So one of them was like, well, I really would like to go to that because I don't want any of this academic stuff. I just want to focus on mine. I said, well, there is a little, every side, they all have pluses, but the thing you have to remember is that what happens if that one particular thing you want fail, and there are just the limited number of people that will be needed to play a particular game. So, but there is a lot more opportunities for you if you broaden yourself and you go through the academic and you have something you can always come back to. So part of what I think maybe the problem is the limited world that most of them grew up in, not having seen that, hey, I can be a medical doctor, or I can be an educationist, or not having seen a lot of people like us, that they can see that, oh, I can also do this. Because one of the things that I have observed at Barton, I remember there was a time an elder African-American woman was coming up to my office. Well, I didn't know what at the time, I didn't know she was coming to my office, but I met her on the stage and I felt like she wanted something. So I stopped and I said, is there anything I can do to help? She looked at me strangely and she said, well, I wanted to see Dr. Dobe. I said, well, and I smiled a little bit. I said, yeah, this is me. And she started singing a lot of praise about, she couldn't believe it. She was told that there is an African-American professor here. She never would have believed that there will be somebody like this at Barton, and even in the sciences. It was a very strange thing to me. And look at this, is that really? I said, yes, you do not know. And the woman went on and on and on. And the long and short of it is that, well, I said, well, I'm very happy I'm here. I hope that I can make a difference. But unfortunately, for the African-American male student that I have encountered, is like the background. So I don't think it's more of them coming to college, but I think the work has to be done in the background to let them understand that there is a much bigger world for them. Now, I'll give you maybe a couple of more examples and I will share up here. One of them was, I had a student who I taught a course where I have to teach them programming. Now, in that, this African-American student, he was clearly the best in the class. I tried to convince him that, you have a talent for this. What is preventing you from moving forward to this? At the end of that conversation, he told me, well, my family doesn't understand any of these things. Going back to tell them that this is what I would like to be this, they never will understand. I said, why don't you get them to talk to me? I would like to talk to them. And he wouldn't have anything of it. So I said, okay, maybe my understanding of the cultural background of things here may be different. So we're lucky now at Barton that my colleague went to school here, born here, went to school here, all of that. So I took this student, I said, hey, come and see Dr. Bean. That is the name of my colleague. So I went, before I did that, I talked to him and I said, I have this student that I think you should talk to. Maybe he can understand you a lot more than he will of me. And, but unfortunately, we couldn't get him I don't think he was also that successful in getting him to see that there is a much broader what he can do this and all that. There is only one time, and this was in Wilson Community College. One of my students, an African-American male, called me aside after, I used to talk to them about my experiences, what he can do, the world out there for them. And he called me aside and said, if I had met you when I was at A&T and trying to be this, I would have made better life for myself than this. He went there to play basketball. That didn't work for him. One thing led to the other. He left and now had to come back and this was some years back. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened to me because, again, I was encouraging him that, look, it is not too late. You can go back, take all the physics courses you want, because at the time I was teaching them applied physics and schematics and some other stuff. I said, go, you can always go back. It is not too late. Unfortunately, I will admit that I haven't kept up with him, so I don't know where he is now, but he was the only one male who, approached me and said that. All the other ones I have tried, they give all these excuses. They wanted to do something else other than what I think they should be focusing on. So I think the problem more is the background. What is the world they live in? How can we make that so that they know that there are more things for them that they could do? So I think that's where the problem may lie.
Thank you, Dr. Dobie. Could I, what an interesting conversation. The time has flown by. Maybe as time should we see, Amy, if we have any questions from the audience that they'd like to ask at this point?
Dr. Wright, I have one.
Would you?
Carol White.
Hello there. This is Dr. Carol White, who is a Wilson Community College trustee and a retired educator.
My question to the panel is, what do you believe has been the impact of COVID on education, on the education of minority students? And how do you envision, what do you envision their needs will be or next steps for them post-COVID?
Who wants to give that a shot? Dr. Chambers, was that you?
I'll try to be quick. I believe the experiences are going to be varied by things like bandwidth. And so you have that accessibility, your ability to use remote services, and just those general accessibility points are going to vary. But I think it's also going to emphasize the need K-12 to be able to differentiate education. You're going to have children, in grade 4, but on very different levels, depending on how they're able to progress. And that's going to be, cross and within, African-American communities.
Anybody else like to add to that or like to ask another question?
If I can just comment and say that, there's lots of technology resources and including software that's out there. But if we have students who cannot access them because they don't have internet access at home, or at least high-speed broadband internet access at home, it hurts them. If they don't have the resources, the family doesn't have the resources to invest in supplemental tools to help these students, just like before computers, we knew the value of encyclopedia sets, and Dr. Chambers was talking about being a walking encyclopedia. I remember distinctly being one of the few families in my extended family, looking at my cousins, and we used to go over to my cousins' houses all the time. And we were one of the few that were fortunate enough to get the, World Book Encyclopedia set. I think we had a 1976 version. I would read that from the first version all the way to the end. I mean, it was just incredible. And I'm sure that benefited me as a learner. And so fast forward to today, if our young people they may have a cell phone, but that cell phone doesn't allow for everything that they need. And so that's going to continue to further divide, create that, what do we call it 15 years ago, the digital divide. it's going to continue on. So we need to make sure that there are high quality programs, software packages that are available to all of our students, and that they can access it with high quality, high broadband, high speed internet as well.
Thank you. You know, Dr. McCloud, that speaks to another question we got, which I think the question's being covered, but the question was about the switching of terminology from achievement gap to opportunity gap, because it's really a more accurate description of where the issue lies, is in the gap of opportunity, which then leads to the gap of achievement. We had a question from Wilson Community College history instructor, Jeffrey Wilhelm. Jeff?
It's kind of been hit on, but you guys are bouncing around. It's sort of summarizing the whole thing we've been talking about here. And we're talking about economic disparities and economic disadvantages that are very inherent, of course, in Eastern North Carolina, given its historical circumstances, and other portions of the South as well. I've been doing this for a while now. And every year we do the same thing. We go, it's tough, and we can't control the home environment. And at the same time, we're having issues, as Dr. Dovey was saying, and others, as Dr. McCloud said, once we get them, they're here. But what about the people who aren't here? What about the people? How do we sell them the great opportunity, the great sort of game changer, the form of meritocracy? It's going to come through the degree. And until we can get more Black males, and particularly Black males, and then more Black females, because in my classes, females outperform as well. But until we get more of those people holding degrees and get more people holding positions in universities and colleges and other places, those economic changes are never going to take place. We're just going to keep throwing up our hands year after year. And so my question is, what can we do as a community, at the community college level? How can the community college service the community in a way that we can sell that to people, if anything? But thank you. And one last thing before we go, Dr. McCloud, the World Book Encyclopedia. I still have mine.
That's probably you have your iPad sitting on that, don't you, Jeff? That's what I use my Webster's Collegiate and my Rodale synonym finder for it. It puts the iPad at the perfect height. I will say let me say, Dr. Roberts, I will say we had this question just the other day. In fact, in a meeting we had, Dr. Carol White, whom you heard from a few minutes ago, asked this question about what our student demographics were like. And that depends. The curriculum student demographics are one thing, and the continuing education demographics are quite a different thing. But I'll say generally Wilson County, which is our service area, is roughly 50% white, 40% Black, and 10% Hispanic. That's not exact, but that's pretty close. And that's about what the college is. However, when you dig down into the numbers, that's where you begin to see the disparities. So, the big numbers don't always tell you, don't always give you the answers that you really need to know. Dr. Roberts?
I was just going to say, I think it's important, and Dr. Dovey kind of alluded to this earlier. I think it's important that students and people in the community see that there are people who look like them in the classrooms, in administration. I've been working here a little over a year now, and I've only told a couple of people this, but I had a student who came to my office one day. He was sent over by another department, and when he walked in, he said, he just made that kind of, just went like that, and I said, what's wrong? And he said, you're Black. And I said, yeah, I'm glad you noticed. And he's a Black male. And he said, no offense, miss. He said, when they said, walk over to see Dr. Sheril Roberts, I was expecting to see a white woman. And I said, well, why was that? And he said, I just want to congratulate you. He said, I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding, but, I'm just so proud of you. And he said, I just can't believe you're in this position and you have your doctorate. And and he just went on, and we sat there and we talked about it for a good little while until we got into his issue, which was, he was homeless, he was a veteran, had been, kicked out of his classes because he wasn't attending and wanted to get back in. but it meant so much to him to see someone who looked like him, although I'm not a male, but I look just like him. And, to see me in this position and to have this degree, was really shocking to him, but it made him proud. And he couldn't wait, to just congratulate me on that. And like I said, we talked about that for a long time. So I think the more we have, people of color, not just Black people, but people of color in the classrooms, in administration, I think, that's how you're going to reach people in the community, because they can see, hey, there's someone who looks like me. But not only that, as administrators, as staff of the college, we have to go out and meet people where they are. Not every person, that we're recruiting is going to be in a particular neighborhood. But if we can reach all neighborhoods, and expose everyone to, what we offer here at the college, I think we would be more successful at just kind of showing students and people in the community, you can make it, you can do the same thing, we have opportunities here for you as well. So I just thought that was really eye-opening, and it was a proud moment, because you never know, once you get to a certain point, you never know how much, you've done, affects other people. So I was really proud of that moment.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. Let me give a shout out to one of your African American WCC colleagues, who I see has been on the screen once or twice, but has not asked a question. But I'm not going to let Angela Grantham get away that easily. If you're still out there, Angela, as ridiculous, this sounds ridiculous for me to even say, but I was recently notified that I won a community college, a national community college President's Award for supporting our local Phi Theta Kappa, which is our honor society, which is really funny, because my support, really the extent of it is saying something like, yes, you can spend money on that. I mean, really, that's about the extent of my support, and I won some award for that. And then we found out a few days later that our local chapter is being recognized also as being one of the outstanding chapters in the nation. And why I speak to this is because the thread that ties those two awards together is absolutely 110% Angela Grantham. She's the person who makes me look good by supporting the club. And she's the person who, from year to year, along with some great students, of course, but year to year, she's the thread that runs through that club from one year to another, and keeps it doing very well. So, Angela, and you should have won the Club Advisor Award in addition to the club, and maybe instead of mine. So.
Well, thank you so very much. I did want to make a comment that this discussion has been absolutely wonderful to me. The Phi Theta Kappas did a somewhat similar discussion on just a topic of a movie, but the open discussion about the dealings of being Black and the pros and cons of what you have to go to that is sometimes not known or seen by others. Just some of our personal trials and tribulations that we often have to overcome was so rewarding and eye-opening to hear the discussion of it. So I just want to definitely commend everyone that was on the panel tonight for your thoughts and just the comments that were made and things said. It would have been awesome to have a lot more people on this, I think, than was, but a starting point is always a good place. And I think programs for us at our college, like Image, for example, we partnered Phi Theta Kappa often with Image on doing things. And I do hope that that is brought back and goes into full force, because the few people you touch in programs like that, I feel makes a huge difference. And though sometimes programs like that may kind of dwindle down, or people think it wasn't really that important, maybe because nobody's interested, I feel like we should always let it be there for the opportunity of the one or two people that it touched, and eventually hundreds of people that it could change lives for tremendously. So definitely, I think this was really great.
Thank you. And by the way, Ms. Grantham I believe she was doing a shout out to the NCCU Eagles a while ago when I first saw your name on there. And then I believe you have a master's in math from Wake Forest, right, Angela? Yeah.
Yes, that is true. So again, getting the experience of both, but that preparation, like some that we're talking about, the HBCU experience is like none other to me. And for people that get to experience that and have that to encourage them and to kind of be their foundation, I feel it does make a tremendous difference in your progression in life. So definitely.
Thank you. And for being a super advisor, as is Dr. Moody, by the way. Speaking of image, Dr. Moody's done a lot of work with our African-American students, and particularly our African-American male students. Well, I said 7:30, and I don't want to be the downer to close this down, but is there anything that first of all, let me say on behalf of Wilson Community College and the Wilson Community College family, and the Wilson community. Thank you, panelists, so much for giving up your time tonight for this event. We really appreciate it. And I've seen a number of comments come across the screen about what a great conversation it's been and how useful and meaningful it is. And I would certainly add my amen to that. So thank you very much. Is anyone, anything any of the panelists would like to add here that we haven't talked about, Dr. Dovey?
So here is my final point, so to say, that I think in all of this, it is very important that the family of our students they are invested into seeing their children, their grandchildren go through to the highest level that they can. Because again, one of my observation has been that it looks to me like from the home, as they go higher up in education, they seem to be more and more isolated, because especially for the first generation students, where they realize that you become more and more alone in being that. Your family may be proud of you, but one of the things that and I'm saying this from the point of view, I digress a little bit here, that I remember in Wilson, when I used to live in Wilson, my kids were growing up. One of the things that they brought home one day was, my peers think that we are white. And for me, I never really understood that. And I said, what does that mean? You were black. What do you mean by being white? And it's the way they speak, the way they try to, and for them, they are setting themselves apart. And my children want to belong. So that can be a problem as they go up and up. They realize that they are becoming more and more alone. They do not have people of their kind to sit together with and have the normal conversation that you have had. Now they are tagged of being different. They are tagged of being going to the other side. And so I think part of our problem in the African-American community is that we need to support our own. We still need to understand that I may have a doctor to my name, but I'm still the same John that you knew growing up. I'm still the same Sheril, the same Crystal, the same Greg or David that you knew. We have not changed, so that we have that acceptance. Otherwise, you get isolated from your community. Kids growing up seeing that perhaps don't want to be different. They want to belong. And I think that is one of the big problems that we have.
Thank you.
Yes, for many families, sending their children to college is a middle passage experience because they have no clue what's going through that experience. And so that's why I put in the chat the book, African Americans in College Choice by Cassie Freeman. And you're right, it takes a community to raise a college student. So yes, so we can be there, be our brothers and sisters keepers.
And
thank you.
I was going to say, in response to Professor Wilhelm's earlier question, I think one of the things that we do need to do is also reach the families, like what Dr. Chambers is saying. we need to do a better job connecting with them. We can't just connect with the students early on. We have to work with the families to help them prepare themselves psychologically as well as financially, you know, working with them with the FAFSA and helping them understand the tremendous benefits of going down this path, that these opportunities, getting a good college education can break the poverty cycle for many families out there. And so I think we need to embrace the families. We need to go to those communities. We need to go to the neighborhoods. We need to have events on our campuses that invite entire families to come and see people like us and to be engaged. And we need to go to church functions and community functions and go to those festivals and have tents set up so that people can come over and see us and engage with us.
Thank you. A couple of points I'd like to make, if you will indulge me as we close up here. One is, as Andrew Walker, our institutional effectiveness director, said on a senior staff meeting we were having the other day, we were talking about trying to get this event in during February because February is Black History Month, and Andrew said, well, you know, who said it has to be February, right? And I said, oh my goodness, you know, you're 100% right. What's special about February other than it's the month with the name? But the topic and the challenge is there year round. So certainly we shouldn't just leave this at February and wait until next February and return to these topics again. And I thought that was a great reminder of something we should do. This should be a year round, and we should have events like this, or at least maybe not exactly like this event tonight, but events aimed at the challenge at least year round. And also, you know, we should even though the population is not as large, about 10% of Wilson County now is Latinx, and we should make some efforts in that direction as well. It's important for our community. And the other thing I'll say in leaving is, I certainly don't compare my experience as a European American male growing up in Northeastern North Carolina to that of the African American experience. But I will say, growing up as a working class kid, my father did 40 years of swing shift in a paper mill, and both my grandfathers worked in mills. None of my grandparents had educations. One of them couldn't read at all. That the experience that was being spoken about, an education, I believe it was Dr. Dobie, and I'm paraphrasing Dr. Dobie, so don't let me put words in your mouth, but about getting an education can in some ways put a real stress on your relationship with your family as you sort of educate yourself away from your family in some respects. And so that can be a common experience. And I think it's maybe a point of discussion where folks of different ethnicities and experiences may have an opportunity to meet and talk about an experience that is common or at least parallel in some respects in the future. Well, thank you, everybody. Again, Dr. Chambers, Dr. McCloud, Dr. Dobie, Dr. Moody, Dr. Roberts, we really appreciate it. Thank you, Amy, and Michael, who is off screen, always behind the screen, making sure that we're working. And thank you for everyone who attended tonight. We appreciate your attention and your interest and the questions and participation of those who did.